Hello, everyone, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. My published fantasy sci-fi writer and screenwriter. He focuses on fast-paced, page-turning, action-filled books with cinematic imagery and powerful heroic storytelling. With his books, he hopes to inspire other storytellers worldwide stories out there. His journey, writing methods, and inspiration are all shared with his followers through his social media accounts, which will be tagged down below in the description of this video, where he strives to build a writing and reading community that feels like they can connect with the writer behind the words. He received a BFA in film with an emphasis on screenwriting from the University of Utah and is pursuing a master's in screenwriting at Loyola Marymount University. His ultimate goal is to one day teach the next generation of aspiring writers, and is also a fellow Californian living in Los Angeles. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to debut guest today, Eric Bowden. Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem, no problem. So before we dive into your book, which I've been following your social media that you've promoted on your platform, is there anything else you'd like to add about your background?
I think you got all the main points. Yeah, I started my YouTube and everything actually before I even published my first book. And the whole goal was just so that I could, connect with an audience, share some of my inspirations, my interests, my writing processes. And that's like the main thing is that, yes, I do use it to promote my books, but I also use it for, talking about my favorite books, my writing processes, do book reviews, things like that. And it's just like it's a reading and writing community based on everything, not just what I write.
Nice, nice. And speaking of your book, what can you tell our viewers and listeners about it? Because the cover really grabs the eye for the reader.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I worked with an artist. His name was Andrea Tintori Montalto, and he knocked out of the park with that cover. We went back and forth, sent a lot of different stuff to each other. And just, when I first saw it, I was like, that is a one-to-one, like exact image of what I see in my own mind when I write and when I see that character. And so the book is a superhero, dark fantasy, sci-fi epic. It follows a teenager named Caden Collins, and he lives in a world full of superpowered humans called Goldens. And on his 16th birthday, he has an awakening, which essentially gives him his own set of powers. And he's immediately taken to the Golden Academy, where he learns what it takes to truly save the world.
Wow, nice, very nice. That definitely does ring a lot of the superheroes, the team ups, everything. And I cannot wait for this book to be released soon because I'm definitely adding it to my collection and will plan to showcase it here on the channel very, very soon, Eric. So definitely keep all of us posted on that.
Awesome. So technically the book released on June 15th. So it is available now.
Oh, sweet. All right. Well, I know what I'm doing soon. I'm going to get a copy of the book.
Awesome. Yeah, of course. I would love to hear your thoughts. I can't wait to hear.
No problem. So let's actually talk about your writing. So in your bio, you've been writing for a very, very long time. Writing has been ingrained in your DNA since you're 12 years old. But what would you say is the aha moment when you realize I'm actually going to go down the career of being an author? So how did that come about in your life?
Well, it was kind of a weird, twisty road with that. I wouldn't say it was just a straight shot where I immediately knew I wanted to be an author. I did start when I was 12 years old. I was writing novellas and short stories and things like that. But I would say after I finished my first novella, finishing that story definitely created a feeling in me where I was like, wow, I would love to do this forever. But of course, I was only 12, 13 years old around that time. It was around like 6th grade when I first started doing that. And I had a long way to go. I was still in school. I think writing and storytelling and stuff I wouldn't say storytelling, but let's say like sitting down and writing novellas and whatnot kind of
Right.
fell off because I was, in school. I was pursuing other things. I was playing sports.
Mm,
And so writing itself took a back seat, but storytelling, at the lunch table with friends and making people laugh, that was always there, no matter what. So I went through middle school, early high school, actually, and I really wasn't considering being a writer at all. And then I would say around my 10th or 11th, sophomore, junior year, I finally decided to go back to it. And it came back in the form of screenwriting. So
okay.
I had discovered a new passion. I had never done screenwriting before, but I heard about it. I always struggled with description, and I never felt like my prose was very good when I was writing those novels when I was younger.
Mm,
So to me, screenwriting was like the perfect thing because you don't really need super flowery prose. You really only have to, you want to focus on making the story as clear as possible. Every page counts. You want to make it, you want it to read quickly. You want the pages to fly. And you don't need to sit there and worry about describing every wall that you see and every shirt that someone's wearing and what things that you want in a novel, essentially. And so when I picked it up, it was like second nature. I loved it, and I use a screenwriting software called Writer's Duet. It was free. I just got it off the internet. And I started writing this animated TV show that I always wanted to, see on television. And a few months later, I had pretty much had an entire season of this show written by myself. Um, and the words were just flying and it felt so natural. And I loved how intuitive the software was. It did the formatting for you, and I could focus on the dialogue and I could focus on the action. And it felt so natural to me. And so that to me was that aha moment where I said, I want to pursue screenwriting pretty much for the rest of my life. So then I decided to apply to University of Utah and get a film degree with an emphasis on screenwriting. Um, Before that, I was taking as many screenwriting classes as I could in high school and
right.
stuff. I was going to writers' workshops. I was attending film camps where I was directing and writing screenplays. And then that obviously all led into University of Utah, where I was continuing to do the same thing. I did a lot of roundtable workshops where you bring in pages every week, you sit there and have them read aloud, and then one by one, every person, let's say there's like 12 people in the room, would sit there and give you feedback. And I loved it. I loved being surrounded by story. I loved having my work critiqued and talked about and engaging with other people about it. And this was all focused around screenwriting at the time. I loved all of it. But then my senior year of college, I was in the second semester of my senior year, and I had just applied to graduate school because I wanted to continue to pursue screenwriting. And I was talking to a friend, and he mentioned writing a book. And I, kind of had that like light bulb in my head. I was like, man, I haven't thought about writing a book in a long time. And then here's my, one of my best friends in screenwriting who wants to write a book too. And it just, like I said, it was that aha moment. And I wanted to give it my own go and try and see what I could do with writing a book myself. I adapted a superhero screenplay that I had written for a television series in the fall, and I adapted it into this story. But I only had about half of the book or the screenplay.
Okay.
Yeah, like the television series only had about half of it, the season completed. And so by that point, I wanted to see what would happen, once I ran out of material. And I was worried. I was like, man, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, the second I ran out of it, it was just a launch pad, and I just kept flying. And I immediately fell back in love with writing novels again. Um, I learned to actually like the description. So it was funny because I felt with screenplays, it was so bare bones and minimalistic. I couldn't really get my points across completely, or I couldn't be as descriptive as I wanted to. And novel writing just seemed to open that door again. And I just fell in love with it. And now I would actually say I enjoy writing novels more than I enjoy writing screenplays.
Awesome. You're probably the second guest I've had on the show whose story actually started off as screenplay and then adapted it into a story. And I think, do I have his book right here? Yes. Brian Fitzpatrick, Metcalf, viewers and listeners. If you remember this interview, Brian said that Metcalf started off as a script for a TV show, but adapted it into a novel, and then the other ones followed suit. So you are now the second guest that has said the same thing. So very,
Wow.
very nice, Eric. So more specifically about the book itself. So when you adapted this screenplay into a novel, of course, there are some challenges adapting a screenplay to a novel, filling in this, the nitty gritty, the specifics. But ultimately, what was the need you want to satisfy for prospective readers of this story and of this genre? And also, what was your goal setting out with the creation of this book?
Well, to me, I wanted to write a book that didn't have slog in it. I wanted it to be a page turner. I wanted it to also be the book that gets people reading again, gets people into the fantasy and sci-fi genre. So to me, that was the ultimate goal when I set out to write it. I wanted something fast-paced. I wanted a page turner. I wanted no slog. And I wanted it to be very easy to get into. So it's not a super long book. It's only about 290 pages.
Okay.
So for me, I wanted people to, I wanted the investment to be low. They didn't have to invest a lot of time in it. It was going to be easy to read. And so to me, that was the ultimate goal, is to create that action-packed book that gets people like excited to read again and ignite that enjoyment that they used to have. Like, let's say when they used to read Percy Jackson or Harry Potter when they were younger, but they hadn't read anything since then. I wanted an academy to be that middle ground where, hey, there's a whole world of fantasy and sci-fi that you guys don't even know about. You have A Song of Ice and Fire and Dune and Wheel of Time. But unfortunately, all those books, for a lot of people, are really hard to get into. They're giant books. There's a ton in the series, and they're really dense. So I was like, well, how do I create that bridge to open the world of all these incredible stories that I know are out there waiting to be read by some of these people? And that is where I found the niche for the Golden Academy, is to insert that book right in the middle, where it's a jumping point from Percy Jackson and some of those young adult stories into something a little bit more mature, but it still has those.
Okay.
And then also it shows you the epic scale of some of these other books that are out there.
Nice. And what was the initial reaction throughout the process? Were they positive, negative, mixed? And with the release of the book and the reviews that have come with it, do you feel that the reviews have validated your promise and your goal that you set out with the Academy?
Yes, absolutely. I would say so far the feedback that I've gotten has been great. I've really enjoyed hearing what everyone's thought about it. Mainly people have said that they love the action in it, which I was really hoping for. The world building and the lore, people have been very invested in. They want to know more. Pretty much everyone who's read it so far tells me that they cannot wait to read the second book, because it does lead you in that direction where you want to know more of these answers. So that is something I'm really happy to hear about from a lot of people. I would say people don't just, openly praise it and say this is the greatest book they've ever read. They do understand that I am a debut, author, and this is my first book ever released. So there are some parts that, I need to work on. develop some characters more, slow the story down a little bit because it does move at a lightning pace. So there are some things that I have learned that I can work on and take into my future novels. But
Right.
all the things that I was hoping people would pick up on, certain characters that I really loved, action sequences that were inspired from other movies, comic books, or books that I've read that also resonated with other people, the world building aspects. So it just, to me, I've been over the moon about the feedback, and I feel incredible about it. It really has not reinvigorated me, but invigorated me to continue on with writing this series and getting these books out to everyone. I would say something that was very surprising was, because my action scenes are very descriptive and visceral, according to a lot of my readers, many people have told me that I need to write horror.
Mm.
So that opened up a new genre for me, which I'm actually currently writing my first horror novel right now. And so that was surprising, and I was, not expecting that, but I'll gladly take it. But yeah, it's been really fun, and pretty much a lot of like close friends and people who have read it will oftentimes call me and talk to me for over an hour about their thoughts and feelings about the world. They'll ask questions. And so I've even done this with some of my readers from Instagram and YouTube and stuff. And so I want to say, if anyone's watching this, feel free to reach out if you do have those questions. I'm more than happy to answer stuff. I'm more than happy to talk about it. I love engaging with my audience and my readers. And my whole goal as an author is to, bridge that gap between reader and author. I don't want there to feel like there's a disconnect. I want to be that author who does answer their fans and does reach out to them, or, that you can feel free to reach out to me and talk to me about, what you've read. I'm available, and, it would be great to just, answer questions and connect with people and, see what they thought of the novel, because any feedback helps.
Definitely, 100% true, Eric. And you and I are of the same mind. People have said that my battle scenes and fight scenes are very cinematic. And I don't know if you've done this with your writing, but I love listening and watching battle scenes on YouTube from classic
Yes.
war movies. And if it's not watching it, I love listening to it and just imagining in my head, what's exactly happening. And honestly, it is so refreshing to create those kinds of scenes, especially also the world building and
Yes.
everything like that, which leads actually into this first reflective question. Now, for you, Eric, being a debut author, and also like myself, I was in your shoes of creating a project that is a passion project. Um, is a very daunting process. I've said this numerous times on the show, but being an author, it's not easy. It's hours and hours of editing, hours and hours of revising, revisioning, and finding a cover artist, finding an editor, even for self-publishing, finding the right program that gets your book exactly the way you want it, and presenting it out on the digital stage. And then there's this voice in the back of everyone's head, that voice of imposter syndrome, that's saying, what are you doing? You shouldn't be doing this. So for you, Eric, throughout the process, and possibly even now looking back with the release of your debut book, have you ever had moments of imposter syndrome? And if not, what's continued to discipline you to not only promote your story, but continue writing and offering feedback to other writers and even screenwriters as well?
Mhm. Yeah, totally. I felt like I've definitely, struggled with imposter syndrome. I've had it come up multiple times, even recently, because I'm writing this new horror fantasy Western, and it's inspired heavily by The Gunslinger by Stephen King. And I went and listened to the first chapter of that because I've already read the book in the past. So I pulled up the audiobook, and I immediately could hear just the difference. Like, you can just tell this guy is a professional. You can tell why Stephen King is Stephen King. and why he's one of the greatest, best-selling authors in the world, and one of the greatest authors of our time. And when you compare it to your own writing like that, it's very discouraging, because I look at it and I say, well, I don't write like that. How am I ever supposed to get to a level where I can make this a career and continue writing for the rest of my life? Things like that. And I think a lot of people do that, but the truth is you shouldn't. And the reason why is Stephen King could have compared himself to many other writers of his time. But instead he didn't, and he wrote Stephen King's way. So my biggest thing that has helped me with imposter syndrome and has motivated me throughout my writing career and whatnot has just been, what is Eric Bowden's style, and how does Eric write, and what are the stories that Eric wants to tell? So I tell Eric Bowden stories. I write Eric Bowden books. I don't try and write like Stephen King. I don't try and write like George R.R. Martin. I try and write like Eric Bowden. And that is the biggest tip that I can give people, is figure out your own style. Find out what books that like you like to write. Find out the stories that you like to tell and focus on that. Focus on developing your own unique style, and don't try and compare it to anyone else, because if you do, you'll never write anything, and you'll end up driving yourself crazy, because we can't be these other people, and we shouldn't be. If we were all the same writer, we would have no books. We just have the same across the board. So the fact that you write differently is actually a gift, and that is what will set you apart. So to me, I would always focus on the stories that I like to tell. And the stories that I like to tell come from a place of inspiration. I have been inspired by countless novels, countless comic books, countless video games, movies, TV shows across the board. And I write stories that pull from all of those things and what I saw that inspired me. And I try and give that back out into the world. I try and create those same feelings in my readers. So to me, that is what has kept me motivated. Is I don't, like I said, I don't try and compare. Whenever that imposter syndrome creeps up, I go, hey, I'm not that person, but let's see what I can do. And I know that with these stories that I'm inspired by, if my audience likes the same stuff that I do, I hope they're going to like the same stuff I write, because I know we all come from that same background. We all like that, the same stuff. And like I said, it's all inspired from it. I'll have conversations with people and we'll talk about my book, and I'll say, hey, do you remember this scene in Infinity War? Yeah, this is what I was trying to create with this feeling, and this scene. So that's what helps me. That's what's always kept me motivated. Truly, I don't really try and compare myself anymore to any other writers. I'm just trying to write how Eric Bowden writes. And I think that's the best that any of us can do.
Perfectly said and excellently put, Eric. Now we're actually going over to the business side of being an author. And the first question in this portion of the interview is probably the most important, is the path that every author goes through, either the traditional publishing or the self-publishing route. Now, for you, Eric, based on your bio, you are a debut self-published author for your story. But I'm actually curious, when you finish penning the final draft of the Academy story, did you initially want to go the self-publishing route from the beginning, or did you want to try your hand at the traditional publishing path?
So when I finished the Golden Academy, I definitely considered traditionally publishing. I actually consulted with a lot of my professors at Loyola Marymount, and they told me that, you should definitely try and get a book deal first. I was actually pretty set on self-publishing from the start. The cover was one of the first things that I had created when I finished my novel. I wanted to see that art. And I was pretty sure I was going to self-publish no matter what. And then I talked to a few other authors, a lot of professors within my program, and they definitely urged me to at least try to get a book deal first. And I did send out some query letters and things like that. And you know, I got rejected countless times, and I would
Mm-hmm.
say after being rejected enough, and getting some different advice from another professor who pretty much told me, hey, you need to get your writing out there in any capacity. And having these, you know, gatekeepers in the traditionally published world who are looking at your writing and saying, no, I don't think it's good enough for me to take and put out there, is not a valid excuse to not get your work out there. You need to get your work out there, in my opinion, in any capacity. And you
Very
need to
true.
start building your brand. You need to start building, you know, getting your name out there. And to me, like I was saying with how I write, the whole goal is to develop that style where when someone picks up an Eric Bowden book, they know what they're going to get within it. Um, and so to me, self-publishing was the best way that I could do that, because not only could I control the cover art, which is a very important aspect to me. I love conveying the scene, the emotions of the book. I love the style. And so having that control over the cover art was very important. Also being able to market and do whatever I wanted with it with full creative control.
Mm-hmm.
I read my own book. I read my first chapter of my own book on my YouTube. I released the first page on my Instagram. I released the table of contents. Like I did all these things before the book even came out. And what was great is no one told me, hey, you're not allowed to do this, because I actually own your work. It was instead, I had full, you know, I had the full creative control over it, and I could just do what I felt was necessary to get my work out there and in front of the right people. So I took that advice, created the Instagram, created the YouTube, and started trickling things out. I would talk about the book randomly in videos. I would mention, hey, I'm writing something. This is coming out soon. I would tease, you know, the cover before I released it in the thumbnail of one of my videos. I did a lot of stuff that I don't know if I had had someone looking over my shoulder saying, hey, you're not allowed to do these things. This is how we do it around here. Instead, I wanted to take it into my own hands and say, you know what, I need to get it out there. And I was following the advice of one of my professors. And that's what ultimately led me to self-publishing. Is I was tired of waiting, and I needed to get this story out there. And I knew it could connect with an audience who likes the same things that I do, because, you know, I read all and I watch all these fantasy and sci-fi shows and books and
Mm-hmm.
what. And to me, I knew that audience was there already. And I knew this book would fit right into that mold. So I said, I just have to get it out there, because I know people will enjoy it and will want to read this.
Nice, excellently put. And speaking of audience, I know you said early in the beginning of this interview that you want your book to be a jumping point for fans who enjoy the Percy Jackson, jump into this, and then jump into the more mature fantasy and science fiction books like Song of Ice and Fire and Dune. So
Yes.
for you, Eric, how important is it, in your own opinion, for an author to reconsider their audience? Because I feel for any author, no matter what path they go on, understanding their audience is something that is really not taken into account when writing the book. Because in the beginning, we write the books for ourselves because we enjoy these stories. But when we want to publish and promote them on a wide scale, we have to consider the audience. So, how important is it for an author to really understand their audience? And for you, do you have a good idea of your audience from the beginning process to now with the book already released?
Totally. I would say, to me, I was definitely aware of my audience from the moment I put pen to paper. A big inspiration was in the Invincible series, which is now
Mm-hmm.
a very popular animated television show. But it started off as a comic book series. And to me, I thought to myself, well, if people like Invincible, then they're going to like this. And I'm going to tap into the same type of audience. So it was literally, that was like the birth of the story, was that inspiration from that show, and understanding that you can write stories like these and that there is an audience for that. So to me personally, I feel like I knew my audience from the get-go. I knew it would be people who liked Invincible. And that's why, you know, I describe it as like a mashup of Invincible meets Percy Jackson, that kind of thing. But I would also say too that just because maybe it doesn't have the biggest audience, or that the book that you want to write is not out there yet, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't write it. Because truthfully, I don't think that there is a comparable story like The Golden Academy to another published book right now that I can off the top of my head. That's just because superhero novels don't really exist. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not a big genre. You have fantasy, you have sci-fi, and to me, my superhero story fits in between both. But if I asked you to name 5 superhero novels right now, you know, probably wouldn't be able to name them. And it's just because they're not mainstream. You know what I mean?
Right.
We have superhero movies and television, and then we have superhero comics. But as far as superhero novels go, it's just not really out there. So that was actually a worry of mine. I was like, well, how do I write, there is superhero novels aren't really a thing. So am I doing something wrong by getting into this? But I actually feel like a lot of people who have read it, they look at it as like that breath of fresh air. Like, wow, we haven't seen this. And my whole goal is to inspire people to write more superhero novels, because I think it's the easiest way to get stories out there. Because obviously, coming from a screenwriting background, I know how hard it is to make superhero movies and television shows. So to me, the barrier of entry on superhero novels is probably the lowest, because, comics, you need a really good artist. You probably need backing from a company like, Marvel or DC. Whereas superhero novels, you don't need Marvel or DC.
Right.
You can do whatever you want. You can write whatever you want. And to me, because it's kind of an untapped market, there's actually a lot of space for these stories. So that's how I would put it. I would say definitely understand your audience, because you don't want to release a book that, you think no one would be interested in, but don't let that discourage you from doing something new.
Definitely. And then to lean to the next question. Now, you've already said, you've already mentioned, name drop Stephen King as like a big inspiration in terms of like, how he's able to write, and how you mentioned before that for an author, you want to write in your own style. When people pick up about him book, it's like, okay, this is who this author is. This is how he writes. I know what I'm getting into. But I also feel it's important to highlight the authors that have helped us in our own author's journey, because we're always inspired by numerous authors for very different things. We may like one author's world building. We may like one author's character stories, character arcs. We may like one author's whole narrative structure. So for you, Eric, who would you say are the authors that have really helped you come to your own as an author yourself?
Stephen King to me is probably one of the biggest inspirations in showing me, how to write with energy. The pace at which he writes is very, very inspiring to me. And I love his stories. I love how he also does a bunch of different genres. You can't put a Stephen King really into a box. Yes, he is a horror writer, but have you read The Dark Tower? That's a giant fantasy story. It even has sci-fi elements in it. So Stephen King, I would say, is probably number one. Brandon Sanderson is huge for me as well. I would say, I love his writing. However, what really draws me to Brandon Sanderson is his ability to give back to the world. When I was writing my first novel, which, The Golden Academy that just came out, I would go and watch his lectures on YouTube. He would post them for free. And he has lectures of how to write action. He has world building lectures. He has character lectures. He has advice on the publishing industry itself. And so that was a massive inspiration to me. Because not only do I want to write, but I also want to teach. I want to help other writers. I want to, and that's a big thing with my books, is I want to inspire other writers to write superhero stories or to write anything they really want, but I want to help facilitate that creativity and whatnot. And so to me, that's where I'm mainly inspired by him. Obviously, his magic systems are pretty awesome too.
Yes.
Something I definitely would like to aspire to write one day as well. Patrick Rothfuss's prose, to me, that is the most beautiful prose I've ever read in The Name of the Wind. And it just, I don't know if I could ever get to a level like that. I'm personally not, I wouldn't say prose is my strong suit with my writing, but it is definitely something that I look up to and admire and wish to get close to one day, because he just has a way of words with some of those sentences. And then Frank Herbert. I really like Frank Herbert, where when you read Dune, he has a very strong message in it, but it's not overtly thrown into your face. It's
Right.
not shoved down your throat. It's this beautifully, incredibly complex and well-crafted, intricate story with so much depth, but at its core, it has a very strong message. But you might not even realize it, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what I think is the beauty of it. Is when you read it, you might go, "Oh, I didn't even pick up on that the first time I read it." And so to me, I love that about the Dune books, and that's something that I aspire to put into my own stories. Something I really try to do with the Golden Academy is have messages within that story, but that you could easily overlook, that you might not realize, that you might only pick up on the second time around, but never just shoving those messages in your face, and telling you this is this. I want it to be more subtle and subliminal. And so to me, Frank Herbert really exemplifies that. So I would say those are the authors that have really inspired me. And I would probably also throw out Rick Warden because of the Percy Jackson series, because he was the first one to get me into reading and probably sparked the creativity that I have now. So yeah, I would say those are the authors.
Nice. And for the next one, I'm actually going to combine two questions into one because I actually feel that they actually work together.
Okay.
Now, I'm sure you definitely, Eric, or may have some thoughts on it that for any first-time author, when we ever get like the advance feedback from like our readers or our followers saying, this book is good, and saying like, oh, it's like comparing this to this, like, oh, this is probably the next Percy Jackson, this is the next Redwall series, or the next, I don't know, the other book that's not Percy Jackson was by the same author, but it's a different series altogether. But all these play factors into the bravado of being an author, and that's wanting to get those readerships, people who do like the Percy Jackson stories, or even as the jumping point, people who also enjoy Frank Herbert's Dune, George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, and so forth. But I definitely feel that is a little dangerous for any first-time author, especially the path they want to go on, which is, do they want to be an author or be known as an author? Because both have two different goals in mind. And one author gave me a great piece of advice, which I love sharing with other authors, which is, for a debut author, there is no guarantee that their first work is going to be the start of their legacy. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, of course. Like everything, you have authors whose first work skyrockets them to award-winning status, and they're able to live off of that success to create new stories. But on the other side of the coin, you have authors who rise a little bit, fall, and rinse and repeat, and imposter syndrome comes back even more with a vengeance. And ultimately, it just boils down to, what were your long-term goals down this path? Did you want to be an author and just create stories and not really go down the path of getting famous as the initial goal? If it comes along naturally, that's fine. As opposed to, you don't care what anyone says, you're going to be a New York Times bestselling author no matter what, but you ultimately run to the path of possibly killing your passion along the way because you're no longer interested in writing to write. You're just writing to either get readers, join the latest trend in the book publishing world, and so forth. So, Eric, in your opinion, and from what you've experienced in your journey as an author, how important is it for fellow authors to really understand that there is no guarantee that their debut, anything is going to be the start of their legacy, but it should not deter them from writing if writing is indeed what they truly want to do, nor should they push aside new readers whose first experience reading could possibly be their first story. As you mentioned earlier, that this book could possibly be the jumping point for those who haven't read books like Harry Potter, Percy Jackson in a long time.
Yeah, I think that it's important to never declare your own magnum opus, in my opinion. I think that every author that we look at who has these magnum opuses, they've been declared by the audience and the reader. And I think that if you do that yourself, you will really shoehorn or, put yourself into a box and really, just cut yourself off from so many other fantastic opportunities and future stories that you could tell because you think, oh, this is the end all be all. And so to me, my first novel wasn't a New York Times bestseller. I don't think it even made any lists really. I think the only lists I'm on right now is it's under, I think it's like number 35 on new releases for superhero novels right now on Amazon.
Congratulations for that.
Thank you. But it never touched number one. It's not on any list that, I could put on the front of my book or anything. But it doesn't stop me. I still want to continue to tell stories. Like I said, I'm in the middle right now of actually writing a side series along the Gidorian Saga, which is the series that I just released. And it's because I have a true love for it. I think that the people who go into it for the money or go in for it for the fame and things like that, I think that their hearts and their minds aren't in the right place to begin with. I think truly, if you want to do this forever and you want to make a career out of it and things like that, it has to come from a place of love, not only for the act of writing, because I think I hear a lot of writers and a lot of successful writers, which always surprises me. They say that they hate writing. I don't understand that. I don't understand how you can be a writer and hate writing. To me, writing is the most beautiful thing that I can do in life. It gives me purpose. It makes me happy. I enjoy it every time I sit down. It's probably one of the greatest things that I do in my life. I have a bunch of different hobbies, but I would put writing books up there or screenplays as, number one as well. Like I would put it right up there with any of my other hobbies, because just to me, it is that great. However, that doesn't mean that it's not always difficult. It can be difficult. Some days I'm not inspired. Some days I don't want to do it. Always I am happy doing it in some capacity, because I think the ability to write stories, to put stories out into the world, to create art is what makes us human. And so to me, that is, like I said, the most beautiful thing that I can do. I have a deep passion for it. And so that is what keeps me going. Even with this new horror book I'm writing, I'm not writing it because people are telling me I should write horror. I'm writing it because I actually want to write horror. I want to try.
Right.
I want to see how it goes. I love the Gidorian Saga, but I'm one book in and I'm not declaring that it's my magnum opus. I'm not saying that, oh, well, I'll never write something better than this. And now, I can never write something else. No, I want to write both and then throw both out there, see what people think. And while they're sitting there, going through those books, I'm going to be writing something else. I have so many ideas. I have so many inspirations, and I hopefully will never declare my own magnum opus and say, yeah, the Gidorian Saga is about as good as it's ever going to get for me. I personally want to write until my fingers don't work anymore. I want to write until the end of my days. And it has nothing to do with fame, has nothing to do with money, anything like that. It really comes down to a love of entertaining people, making people happy, giving them energy with my own writing, making them feel something. That's a big thing for my writing, is just, can you walk away and will you have felt one thing? Will it have inspired you or made you, introspect and look at your own life and the way you treat other people or the way you treat yourself? I want that to be the biggest takeaway from my books. And so whether or not one person is reading them or 1,000 people are reading them, I will still write them for that one person, or even if that one person isn't there, because oftentimes they aren't when you're starting these things, then you have to write for yourself.
Right.
And I write for myself first and foremost. I don't necessarily go, well, I'm just going to write this book, and if no one else likes it, well, then screw them, whatever. I think that's not the best way to go about things, because a lot of times people will have good feedback. And there also is bad feedback, and you have to be able to take the note within the note when it comes to things like that. But to me, I write the stories that I wish to see in the world. I write the stories that would inspire me. I write the stories that would entertain myself, that would excite me, that I would want to turn the pages and learn more about. And so to me, I feel like when I write stories like that are pushing me, like my enjoyment and things like that, or while I'm writing it, I'm on the edge of my seat, excited, and the words are flowing, and I'm flying through the pages, and I write something and I sit back and I'm just like, oh, that was so epic, or that was so cool. That to me is a good sign. That makes me think that if that's coming across to myself, then it's going to translate to my reader as well. So that would be my biggest tip for anyone like that who is struggling with the motivation, or who is chasing those monetary or like fame gains and things like that. You need to be entertaining yourself first and foremost. And if you're not having fun with your own book, chances are your reader probably won't be having fun either. So focus on, entertaining yourself first. And I think the motivation will always be there. And I think that you can write forever, because I have posters. I have big canvas posters of all my covers. I've actually already made covers for books 2 and 3 because I've written first drafts for those books. And I have them in my living room on my wall. So every day I walk in, I can see my posters on the wall, and it's inspiring. And that's even if no one else was reading my books, seeing my own stories on the wall like that would absolutely make me continue reading or writing and whatnot. So that's where it comes from me.
Awesome. And you actually kind of answered the last question of the interview, which was, what was your word of wisdom? But you've actually given some great words of wisdom. So I'm actually going to give you the last 2 questions of this interview, just really quick, because we're almost nearing the end of this really, really great interview, Eric. And this is a 2-parter, which is, you've mentioned a lot of people who have been big supporters, your professors, fellow screenwriters, and so forth. Is there anyone else you would like to give a shout out to who have really been in your corner since day one? And also, as the last reflective question, just really quick, how different would your life be if you were not an author and solely focusing and putting your energy in making a screenplay for the Golden Academy series?
Totally. So for me, I've had a lot of my closest friends, and family, they have been supporters and readers since day one. When I wrote my first draft, I've sent it to some of my closest friends, and those people just took the story, read the whole thing front to back, gave me a phone call, called me, gave me feedback. And to me, if I had not had those friends and family at the beginning, who had taken that time to read those stories, talk to me about it, and say, hey, I think you've got something here that you should get out into the world, or I really like this scene, I really like this character, I need to read book 2, I need to continue. Without those friends and family, I think that I would, I don't know how things would have gone. So to me, those have been the biggest supporters. There's like those close friends and family in my life. And if they watch this, they will know who they are, because I've sent them signed copies, personally, to each one of them. And because they were the first people to ever read it. So to me, that was the biggest thing, is those people in my life who took that time to, even when I had nothing, when I just had one chapter or had an idea, and would sit there and listen to me and hear me out fully, and then converse and talk about it and make me feel like I'm heard, and that what I'm trying to do is valid, and that I should keep trying to do it. And funnily enough, too, after starting my YouTube and Instagram as well, I've had a lot of people on both of those platforms who have reached out to me personally, who have told me how much they enjoy the book, who have talked to me about it, you know, left reviews, comments, things like that. So really, it's even been the world who's helped me, you know, continue on with this journey. I've gotten much more positive feedback than negative, which is really incredible in this day and age, where you think that most people want to tear what you try and build up down. And so to get so much positive feedback, and to have people liking what I'm posting, commenting, DMing me, you know, getting in conversations about my work when I post writing updates and say, hey guys, I'm writing this book, I'm 8,000 words into it, and seeing people like it, having them, you know, message me and say like, can't wait to read this. That is what is really driving me at this point, is just so much positive feedback. But it really started before I got it from the world. It started from the people around me. So I would say, too, trying to anyone who's writing right now, try and find those people. If even if they're not your friends or your family or whatever, try and find those people who do give you that feedback and help you and push you to get your work out there. Don't just sit, you know, in your room and keep your story to yourself. I'm a big believer in getting it out there. And even if you fully might not believe in it, or you don't think necessarily it's the best story ever, you need eyes on it. And there are going to be people for sure who hate on it, and, you know, say you're terrible and you should quit this and never start it again. But try and find those people who not just give you positive feedback, but who are genuinely interested in you and your stories, and try and converse with them and hear what they're trying to say about your work, because ultimately it'll make you better, but also it'll, you know, energize you and keep you going on this very difficult path.
Wow, that is 3 for 3. Best words of wisdom, Eric. Thank you. And thank you, viewers, for joining us for this incredible author interview. I want to give a huge thank you to Eric for coming on the show and telling us all about his journey as an author. And we wish him the best success going forward for him and his book, The Golden Academy. Now, Eric, before we sign off, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find and engage with you on social media to drop in and say hi and stay up to date with updates for the book, the channel, and so forth?
So I'm currently on YouTube and Instagram, and I also have a subreddit dedicated specifically to the Gidorian Saga series. So you can find me both on YouTube and Instagram at Eric Bowden Books, and then you can find me on Reddit, the Gidorian Saga. And essentially, they're all open lines of communication. So I'm available with DMs on Instagram if you want to talk about the book, or you have any questions, writing feedback, anything like that. You can reach me on Instagram there. YouTube usually mostly pertains to my videos, because there's no direct line of communication like
right.
So YouTube, if you want to reach me on that, just comment on any videos that you see. I literally try and respond to every single comment that I get on YouTube. I will answer questions there. I'll get into long discussions, whatever you want. That's a good way to find me as well. And then if you have specific questions, whether they are general or spoiler talks, Reddit is a really good way to find me on that, /r/the Gidorian Saga, and that will take you there. You can post anything you want about the story or, about the book and whatnot. And then you can also ask questions and engage in discussions with other fans, myself, whoever else. But again, like I said, I really want to bridge the gap between reader and author. I don't want to be this mysterious figure that, oh, when's this next book coming out? If you ask me, when's the next book coming out, I'll tell you. And I'll tell you where I'm at in the writing process. I'll tell you how far I've gotten. I'll discuss spoilers with you about the books that I've already released, not about necessarily future books, but about anything that's already come out. I'll talk in depth about it. So that is my whole goal, is to build that community where they truly feel like they know the reader, or they know the writer, they know what I like to read, they know what I like to watch, they know my inspirations, and we can just build that community where, there's that connection there. And it doesn't feel like, like I said, I'm just this mysterious person writing these books that you know nothing about. I want you to feel like you know Eric Bowden and the writer behind the work.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. And just really quick, Eric, where can people find and purchase your book if they want to read it themselves?
Of course. So I'm fully available on Amazon and paperback, hardcover, and ebook. I'm also available with Kindle Unlimited too. So you can read the book for free if you have that. Those are the only avenues that I'm on currently. I'm not in Barnes & Noble or anywhere else, just solely on Amazon. And if you see me anywhere else, it's probably not me. So I would make an announcement. There is potential I could get into Barnes & Noble at a later date. I would need to probably go through some like Ingram Spark to get that like mass distribution. But right now I'm exclusively with Amazon.
All right. I'll link that down below in the description of this video. Thank you again so much for joining us, viewers and listeners, for another author interview. And also thank you to Mr. Eric Bowden for coming on the channel and telling us all about his story. And hopefully this will not be the last time we have Eric on the show. So Eric, thank you so very much for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it, and I wish you the very best success in your journey as an author.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. I really enjoyed this. And if you give me the opportunity to be back here again, I absolutely will. So thank you. I've really enjoyed this today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We love having you here on the show. And thank you again, viewers and listeners, for another episode here on the channel. As always, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And this is the Wandering Scribe signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day.